Welcome in, everyone. We've got another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show going. Got Dan in the house.
Caveman.
Yes, sir. We got Ricky's going to be joining us here in a few minutes. Sounds like his laptop froze on him, so he'll be here in just a moment, and then we'll pull him up in. We're going to go ahead and get started. Giants won today, 2-1. Got a little interesting there in the ninth, as it usually does when Doval pitches.
Yeah.
Now, some of it was not his fault, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. But they're 3-1 on this road trip. They're, I think I put in my tweet today that I just sent out that just nice to see them playing with some pride to finish the season. Young guys are showing some good things. But all around good win. Nice to see Mason Black get his first career win. He's looked much improved the last couple starts in this last call up that he's received. Figure that he'll be just an option. I don't think you go into the next season with him slated in the rotation by any stretch, but a nice little option that you might have. He does still have 2 more option years for anybody that's wondering. So he might be a guy that until he settles in might get an occasional spot start, which is good to see. And then on top of that, Elliot Ramos had a shot at the cycle, which would have been awesome, but still had himself a really good game. Kind of got lucky on the single, but we'll take it. That's why you don't draw pictures in the box score. But the triple was hit hard. The double was probably his best hit of the night. That was just an absolute poke to right center. And yeah, I mean, other than that, it's pretty not a lot to talk about. And Casey Schmidt had another nice game. He's been playing well.
Yeah, I think your tweet or post or whatever you call it nowadays kind of hit the hammer on the nail. However you say that phrase. It's good to see the team play with some pride. Especially it probably feels like a punch to the gut after getting eliminated from playoff contention. So it's just good to see them still want to compete, still want to win, and end the season on a good note. So it's always a good thing. What up, the man?
Well, what's up, guys?
What's up, Ricky?
What's up, guys?
Your laptop pulled a Farhan or what?
Yeah. My browser that I need for this just completely froze up on me.
Did you hear the dial-up
so I had to restart it real quick. Yeah.
Brutal. But yeah.
So where are we at? Talking Snell?
We haven't even started that yet. We just kind of did a little quick brief recap of the game. I didn't really comment even on Fitzgerald's error yet. I'm going to leave that for our shortstop talk in a little bit. But yeah, we'll just go ahead and hop in on the Snell discussion. So everyone, we're going to talk a little bit about the Blake Snell situation, whether or not they should extend him, what the deal is. I know Pavlovich has made some comments on some of their, I don't know if it was on their podcast or if it was on just in the post-game show, but it almost feels like the Snell thing is getting increasingly unlikely. I don't know if they're just saying, it's unlikely to get an extension done or if he feels like he's going to be leaving. So if you guys have heard anything, I'll let you chime in on that. But, it's definitely, I think it's kind of the first thing to talk about for this offseason because now that Chapman's been locked up, the biggest question mark as far as I think arbitration eligibles, pending free agents, anything like that. I think Snell's the big question mark because, guys like Conforto, he's gone. Tyro, they already DFA'd him. We talked a little bit about Yaz. I think ultimately the team is probably going to tender him a contract. Now, whether or not he's on the roster next season, that's going to be a question mark. But I think the question whether or not to tender him a contract is probably already figured out. And then, the only other one is Wade, really, because Rodgers will get tendered a contract. And then Wade, his second half, I think, gives people pause, but he's not going to be expensive. So I think ultimately Snell is going to be the big question mark coming into the offseason on whether or not they're going to, it won't even be an extension at that point. He's just going to opt out and, whether or not they're going to be able to sign him. And I'll get your guys' thoughts on if you feel like they should pursue Snell, if you think they should look elsewhere. Just kind of want to hear what you guys think.
Rick, you'll go first.
Personally, I would absolutely extend him. I think, if you're making a change in the organization and moving on from Farhan and possibly Bob Melvin, I think, a potential rebuild or retool becomes a lot quicker if you once again roll out Webb and Snell at the front of the rotation. Obviously, you still have to figure out the lineup and how the position player group looks. But ultimately, anytime you're rolling out two aces at the top of the rotation, you're going to be looking pretty good for the next, at least 2 to possibly 3 years with Snell. Back into that contract probably won't look very good. But honestly, the next few years, you kind of have to prioritize that right now, in my opinion, because they don't really look like a team that's just going to go onto a full on White Sox level rebuild anytime soon. So,
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I've been vocal for a while now about how I want them to re-sign Snell. I wish they would pull a Matt Chapman and just, pull him into the front office and get a deal done before he hits free agency. But like you said, Cody, Pavlovich already pretty much hinted that he's going. He's not going to stay, and it kind of sucks for the reasons that Ricky described. And I think they kind of hinted at it when they shelved Hicks today, and they pretty much told him that they expect him back in the rotation next year. So that kind of got my mind wandering a little bit. I'm like, all right, so they're planning on bringing Hicks back as a starter next year, and that's going to be kind of their excuse for letting Snell walk. So it kind of sucks. So I don't know. I would love to see it because, like you said, having that Snell Webb 1-2 punch is nasty, and especially with all the amount of young players, it's nice to have that veteran presence there,
For sure.
and an ace at the same time. So I don't know. They got the money, they got the funds, they got the spot, but for whatever reason, they don't want to do it. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out just because, maybe they're just because. And again, I didn't hear what Pavlovich said. So did he say he thinks he's gone, like he's walking, or did he just kind of allude that he doesn't feel like they're going to extend him?
Yeah, it's kind of like a mix of the two. I didn't listen to it because I don't watch that or listen to that podcast for personal reasons.
I'm hearing it secondhand.
Yeah, so from what I've heard secondhand, he basically implied that it's a slim to none chance.
Okay. Yeah, I just, to me, it'll be kind of an interesting situation because I think if he gets a big offer somewhere, he'll probably be gone. And I could easily see, as much as we would hate it, I could see the Dodgers forking it out. I could see the Padres forking it out. I could see, any number of these teams doing it. I don't think the Diamondbacks would, though they've shocked us before, looking at like the Greinke deal, for instance. So that wouldn't shock me. I do think he wants to be on the West Coast. I get that impression out of him. I know he wants to be as close to Seattle as he can. And the reality is Seattle's not going to fork over the money for him because why would they with their pitching staff? I mean, it makes zero sense. They need offense, not another arm. So I don't think ultimately he walks, though I do see a scenario where if the market isn't what he wants again, I could see a scenario where he comes back on maybe a high annual short-term deal.
I think the part that just kind of is frustrating for myself and Giants fans is how Snell has openly said that he wants to stay. And he literally said just a couple weeks ago, it's in the Giants' hands. Like it's up to them. Yeah. They want to get it done. So that's what makes, Pavlovich's speculation all that more frustrating because it's like, you got a guy, you got an ace, you have, that reputation across the fan bases around the league that nobody wants to play in San Francisco. You got a 31-year-old 2-time Cy Young Award winner that's on the team and having a phenomenal second half of the season, saying that he wants to stay on the team. And then the speculation, doesn't seem like the Giants, want to spend long-term on pitching. So it's like, come on, man. There comes a point where are you going to rely on, 3 young guys, Logan Webb and a reliever converted starter who obviously struggled this season. You're going to count on that being your staff next year. So it's like, come on, we gotta do something. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I kind of talked about this. I don't know, might've been 3 weeks, a month ago, something like that. I did a video just specifically on Snell that I felt like they should be looking to extend him. I think having an identity for your team is important, and as much as, the reality is of those dynasty years, like Posey is probably going to be the only guy that goes to the Hall of Fame out of that. So, your starting catcher was, but that team was clearly built around pitching. Like those three teams. I mean, the last one we can make an argument, given that it was really just Bumgarner, but like the core of that dynasty was pitching, and everyone knew what their identity was. And this team, and you look around the league, and teams like the Dodgers, they just mash. Teams like the Padres, they mash. The Diamondbacks, speed everywhere, defense, couple aces. Like these teams all have identities, and then you look at the Giants, and it's like, all right, guys, what do you do well? Your bullpen's been kind of good in the second half. Like, okay, that's about it.
They frame well.
Yeah, exactly.
Mixed bag of tier 3 free agents.
Right. But yeah, I think I used to have a book that was like Band of Misfits or something like that, and it's like, yeah, but they also had a Hall of Fame catcher and like 2-time Cy Young winner and a future World Series MVP in their rotation. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, Frederick says Diamondbacks actually have the best WRC plus in the league. Yeah, I mean, they hit, they steal bags, they do everything. Like they're just really good. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like the Giants need to lean in on something. And if that's pitching, build your team around an elite pitching staff and go from there. And I mean, granted, they need help. Like it's not going to just be Webb and Snell. I think it's pretty clear this season that they're going to need at least 3 other guys that can eat up some innings, because you can't put your bullpen in this kind of position another year after the last 2 years. I think that there is just all the evidence they could ever ask for, that they need to get guys that eat up innings. And I know, I don't know if you guys saw Bobby Evans go on Dan's show a week ago or so, but they talked about their last, or I think it was their 2012 World Series team, and all 5 starters cleared 180 innings. It's like
unheard of nowadays.
Gee, I wonder why their bullpen was absolutely dominant in the playoffs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And something that doesn't get talked about a ton is those Giant staffs through, I mean, honestly, 09 to 14, or even 16, if you want to go out that far, there was very few injuries in the rotation up until like guys like Kane got real old. Obviously Bumgarner had like the freak motorcycle accident, stuff like that. But honestly, through those World Series years, they were extremely healthy.
Yeah.
Like it was honestly insane with how consistent they were. Like those guys were always available. And even the guys in the bullpen, same thing. You had Affeldt stabbing himself in the hand and doing weird freak. He had these weird freak fluky, accidents. But other than that, these guys never had arm issues. It was nuts. And you don't really see that nowadays. But that's kind of what you get when you shy away from the commands, lower velo pitchers versus now everybody wants the hard throwing 100-mile-an-hour late inning guys, and even the rotation with guys like Hicks now. Huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Hicks has another good April next season. It's just what's going to happen when like he hits May, he hits a wall, or maybe June, maybe he lasts a little longer, but it's like maybe, what are we going to do when he just falls off a cliff? Because we cannot just sit there and trot him out for 3 months again while he's just taking a beating every start and he's out of gas. Like they can't do what they did this season next season, especially if they want to try and actually be a playoff team. Like they were literally just giving away every 5th game because he could not get through 4 innings half the time. He couldn't get out of it without giving up 3-4 runs. It was just they were just basically throwing up the white flag every time he went out there for a couple, which, to his credit, he was awesome in April. Like, I'll give him a ton of credit. He won them games in April. Like, he was great. And then he hit a wall. It's like, we can't do this again. We just can't. George says, Pav says he believes Snell reaches free agency and that he would not be re-signed before free agency like Chapman. Okay. I mean, so there's a chance. It wouldn't be in Farhan's, MO to sign a pitcher to a long-term deal. So
it comes down to who's going to be the president of baseball operations. If it's Farhan and Snell hits free agency, there's no way you're going to outbid like you said, LA or San Diego or Seattle or one of those teams for him. There's just no chance. Farhan will do, his usual type deals or usual offers that he does, but he's not going to outbid anyone. So, especially for a pitcher. So that's my thing. So I think, and we're not going to get into this tonight. We'll get into it eventually, but depending on who the president of baseball operations is, that's going to ultimately determine whether Snell comes back or not. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's why I think they need to get this over with as soon as possible. If that is the route they're gonna go. I don't know what we need to see in the last week and a half to make that decision, but I think they need to get it done as soon as possible because you don't want to go into the early part of free agency and you're still looking for possibly a manager, a GM, and a president of baseball operation, and then they've already let scouts go. So you don't want to completely clear house and then have a huge void in your front office, going into free agency because guys like Snell aren't going to want to commit to that. You can't just rely on Buster to come in and try to work out deals right at the beginning of the off season. So hopefully they can get it done now and they can start working something out while the playoffs are going on. I know that's what they did with Pete Petilla when they brought him in. They brought him in the middle of the Astros postseason run 2 years ago. So hopefully they can do something similar, and then that way everything's sorted out by the time all these guys are hitting free agency.
Yeah, and kind of like they said, we're not going to go too deep into like who's out there.
Yeah.
There's a couple people that I think would be popular. Is it Majdal? The guy in Baltimore, he's their GM under Elias. Kim, I can never remember how you're supposed to pronounce the last name, but NG, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm not even going to go there.
Marlins.
Yes,
the Marlins.
the lady that was the Marlins GM. I like Pete Petilla. I know it's not the most popular thing. Shane Bloom's out there, although I'm not sure I could ever forgive that guy for that Mookie Betts trade. Sorry. If he butchered that trade to another team, maybe I'd forgive him, but yeah, screw that guy.
Yeah.
I don't have a nice way of putting that. Eng. I don't know what Frederick's trying to say there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
And then there's guys like Billy Owens and who's the guy that robbed like Tabolo? Is that who it was?
Yeah,
I have to double check. So there's a few, but we'll dive into that more if / when Farhan gets the gets the boot. We'll dive into that more.
By Victor's comment just made me crack
up. Yeah, sorry, by Victor. I'm not going to put that on there, but yes.
you gotta laugh out of me though.
Anybody watching this after the fact, just open up the live chats. You'll see it.
Yeah.
George, I would not be surprised if Pete's promoted to Pobo and bringing a GM and assistant. Yeah, I mean, I think with Pete, like, it's pretty clear that as a talent evaluator, he's pretty highly regarded. And in his time here, the aggressiveness in the farm system's gone way up. The drafts have looked way better. I have faith in him in that regard. And it just comes down to, is he more of a risk taker and more aggressive than Farhan? Because if he is, then he might be what everyone was hoping Farhan would have been when they originally got him. So I think he could be a good Pobo, but you never know until you know. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality. Most of the guys are unproven that you're going to hire. They don't really have a track record. So a couple pitchers out there, just getting back that Burns will be a free agent, Kikuchi, Flaherty, Is Waka a free agent? I know Lugo signed a 3-year deal, but
I'm not sure about Walker.
I believe Walker signed only a 1-year deal.
he might be a decent little. If you get him on a 1-year deal, would be a decent option. Grant says, "Don't worry, DeSclafani's a free agent in the offseason."
Don't say that.
Oh man, that was a good day when he got traded.
Yeah. I love that he got traded again, and then the Twins tried to cry foul on it. They're like, "We didn't know about this injury." It's like, who cares? It's addition by subtraction, Twins. If you've seen him,
He's only been hurt for the last 2.5 years,
And when he's not throwing cement mixers at the plate.
Oh boy, PTSD from that.
He said cement mixers.
Yeah, honestly, going back to the starting pitching options, if they are a little bit hesitant on giving Snell a long-term deal, like a lot of these guys are commenting, I do think Corbin Burnes is probably your safest bet, just because, going back to the whole conversation about getting innings eaters outside of Webb, Burnes is extremely consistent. You can pretty much count on him for 170 to 190 innings a year, which is almost what you're getting out of Webb already. So, and then, Cody's mentioned this several times now, but, if Ray is actually healthy all of next year, he's another guy you can count on for giving you a lot of innings over the long haul of the season. And then at that point, you're only worried about filling 2 spots with guys that need to eat innings. So,
yeah, Ray might have a 3.7 ERA, but he'll probably pitch 180 innings if he's healthy. That's valuable.
It'll be a decent 3 or 4.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which, for $25 million, that sucks. But, when you're trying to get out of the Haniger DeSclafani deals, is what it is. You're going to have to take something bad back. And if he eats up the innings, I'll take it. It's an overpay, but we have a lot of young, cheap pitching.
You know who's going to get a nice contract that we haven't talked about? Sean Manaea. I don't know if you guys have seen his numbers. He's going to get a nice contract. He had a great bounce back here.
But how does Farhan get it right and then also just completely screw the pooch on a deal?
I don't know.
I
feel like
he had a bad April, but they cut bait on him so fast and threw him in the pen, and then he just figures it out, and it's like, Farhan, you outsmarted yourself, bud.
Exactly.
You just summed up Farhan's whole stint with the Giants.
Yeah, it's just brutal. So
there's just a huge lack of conviction with him. It's like, oh, this looks like a good idea. This won't be too risky. So I'm going to go this route. And then when it doesn't work out, I'm just going to cut bait extremely quick.
Yeah.
And then let the guy walk. And that way I don't look as bad for not doubling down on something that didn't work out. It's kind of like, all the people that praise him for trading away guys that he screwed up on. Like they just said Haniger, perfect example. DeSclafani after he gives him a contract, perfect example.
I would give him a lot more credit for cleaning up his messes if he was also bringing in high-end talent with it.
Yeah.
So
he's an arsonist and a firefighter at the same time.
Yeah. That's a great analogy.
Except for a fire hose, he has a spray bottle.
Hey, it's got the little fan attached to it, Terrible. Oh God. You know what? The one thing I will say, last point I'll make on Snell, I don't think Snell is an absolute necessity, him specifically, in order to compete next season. I do think it's just a priority that they need at least one more arm that can eat innings. If it's not him, even if it's a number 3, yes, is Snell a better option if they were to actually make the playoffs? Of course, we'd all rather see Snell in a 1-game winner take all or in a short series paired with Webb. He gives you a better chance in October, but I don't think it's as important, the other 6 months of the season. I think in the regular season, if the goal is just trying to get to the playoffs, I do think you can work around without Snell. But, as we've talked about getting high-end talent, he is a high-end talent, and I don't really want to just see him walk away for nothing after they gave away a draft pick, only gave him 1 year, didn't trade him at the deadline on a team that looked like a lost cause, and then let him walk for nothing. That would just be bad business in general. But,
I still like the idea of, for sure bringing back Snell, and then if not, go and resort to Corbin Burns, or if you like Burns more, go with Burns. And then, going in and getting, 1 year prove it deal guy like Jordan Montgomery, who could have a pretty high floor. If you bring him back, obviously he didn't like, same with Snell, he didn't like the way the season started for him, and he just never really got back into a groove. And he also went into a hitter's park, and not the greatest situation for a guy on a 1 year deal. So
yeah,
I kind of like the idea of something like that. And when he's right, he can also give you innings. So I wouldn't mind that at all either. Exactly.
Yeah. Montgomery's a legit 2 when he's at his best.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Probably would be counting on him more as like a 3, but he'll eat innings. Like usually he'll eat innings, at least not this year, but yeah, there's options for sure. Now, if you're not going to go the Snell route, there is something that they're going to have to do, and that's going to go get some bats, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Rap, I mean, we're not advocating for, number one, he's going to be a free agent, so it doesn't really matter at this point. But
I think they're talking about the deadline.
I mean, why would they trade Snell? Because him walking for nothing is worse than trading him.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Even if all you could have gotten was a Connor Norby and some other mid. I mean, Norby looks like a player. We all said he looked like a good player, and he looks like a good player. Yeah, it wouldn't have been the sexy prospect, but yeah, wouldn't have been a sexy prospect, but we'd feel like second base was locked down if he was doing that here.
Yeah.
So
he would have been top 5 in the Giants system this year.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, it's tough. So, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and the other thing people lose sight of is there was a huge segment of Giants fans that were constantly saying the Giants wouldn't have got what they wanted for Snell. And it's like, if you are going to let him walk and you're not going to compete at the end of the season and you're going to be out of the race before September even begins, you trade Snell and you get what you can get and lick your wounds, and you end up with a guy like, the Marlins got Connor Norby, and they got another middle tier prospect in a very good farm system. And that was for Trevor Rogers, a guy who made 4 starts for the Orioles and got demoted to AAA and has done nothing to contribute to their playoff run. And Snell is light years above him. So you can imagine they could have gotten Norby, who has pretty nice ceiling with his power. And then you could have gotten somebody else easily in the top 10 of the Orioles system. It's like, at some point you have to understand, value for Snell or a guy like that versus let's get the best possible package we can get. Let these teams bid against each other. And if we don't get quite what we feel like Snell was worth, hey, at least we got something in return, and he's not walking for nothing.
Yeah. So, the way I look at it, what did we lose? Was it a second or a third round pick for Snell?
I think it was a third because they already had Chapman.
Yeah, second for Chapman, third for Snell.
Okay. Even then, it's kind of like, let's just say hypothetically you do that deal where you get a Norby and a couple other mid-tier prospects. Obviously, it's not, a crazy haul, but you're not losing him for nothing. If you land a Norby in the third round, that's pretty damn good. Yeah. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
Yeah.
You hope
Frederick, you don't get the pick back. It was this last draft that we lost the pick.
Yeah, but I'm just saying hypothetically, it's like
that third round
that third round that you lose and you get Norby out of that, like hypothetically, that's pretty good.
You hope a third round draft pick pans out to be what he was doing in AAA this year.
Yeah, exactly.
And now he's doing it in the majors. It's like, and he might not be a great pick. I know Frederick isn't super high on him, but he might not end up being a good player. But right now he looks like one. So we'll see. I would have been fine with that if that's all they could have gotten. I would have been like, hey, you know what? At least they're getting something. before he walks. But like we said earlier, hopefully they can re-sign him. We'll turn the page on this one, unless you guys have anything you want to add.
No,
I think we kind of said it all.
Yeah,
cool. All right, so next up, we're going to talk a little bit of Grant McCray, because Giants have kind of an interesting thing here where he's looked really good at times. He's looked a bit overmatched at times. I think he's got some stuff with his swing that needs cleaning up personally, particularly at the top of the zone. The off speed and things like that, like, pitch recognition, experience, all that can improve with time. But I do feel like he's got a bit of a hole at the top of the zone, especially with the fastball. But he does bring something to this team that they really need. For those watching the game today alone, I mean, none of the plays necessarily stand out that he made in center field. He wasn't like laying out or anything, but he was getting good jumps on the ball. He was running balls down in the gaps. He kind of was just all over the place out there. It almost looked like what the Orioles did to the Giants yesterday, I guess it was. And then his speed on the base paths, when he does get on base, which, his walk rate is low right now, but historically he's always carried a 10 to 12 or so % walk rate in the minors. I'd anticipate eventually that would translate. But he's a guy that I think, and I'll get your guys' thoughts, I think you have to go get an outfielder that maybe you intend to DH him initially and give him spot starts in the corners or something. But to me, he is a good candidate that you could put in right field or center, if in play or lean right, whatever way you want to do it. But he's a good candidate that you could put him in right field and stick him in the 9-hole.
Yeah.
And be like, dude, you're going to try and bunt a lot like the guy in Washington does.
Yeah.
And not every time, obviously, because you just can't just do that every time. But you're going to try anytime they back up, you're going to drop a bunt down. And otherwise, we're going to try and, hopefully you can develop and with time get better and better. But the speed he brings, the defense he brings, I think has value. And then you could go out and get a Santander or, maybe you make a big trade for a corner outfielder or whatever the case may be. You go some kind of route where if McCray just falls on his face and you hit a point where he's like unplayable, then you can move Ramos to right and then put someone else in the corner, something like that. Go ahead, Dan.
Here's what I'm going to say. It's going to piss off a lot of Giants fans, but I'm going to make it short and sweet. Okay. The justification for Mike Yastrzemski on this team now is these simple facts. He has some speed, he's got a good glove, and he's got some pop. You get that with Grant McCray while being 12 years younger and $9 million cheaper. Plain and simple. He's got a little bit of pop. He's going to have a lot of swing and miss. Oh, what does that sound like? He's got a great glove. What does that sound like? He's got great speed, a little bit better than Yaz. So the main fundamentals that you're praising Mike Yastrzemski for, and mind you, Yaz has been a great Giant. Don't get me wrong. He's been a great Giant, and I know fans adore him. But the main things that Yaz does well in the eyes of Giants fans, that's Grant McCray at 23 years old and at a bargain. You can have him as your 4, or you can have him, slide in, like you said, every day in center or right.
Yeah.
I would prefer him more as like a 4th outfielder that starts and then off the bench / pinch runner. But I don't see any reason why he couldn't fill that role next season.
Yeah.
And Cody, I'm assuming you're referring to Jacob Young. Is that who you're referring to on the Nats?
Yeah, I think that's who it was. I always draw a blank on the guy's name. It's whoever the guy is that they've had hit 9th, and he literally bunts like half the time he's up.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that's a bad comparison at all. And like you said, while his whiff rates are crazy high, we're not seeing the team put any emphasis on bunting at all, whether it was with Lee or with Lee kind of struggled with it in a very small sample size, but you're not really seeing that with Lee or McCray. But I think, if they put a bigger emphasis on that and him hitting the ball on the ground a little bit more, you don't want to take away some of his power. But that could be a really nice top and bottom of the order, especially when those guys are coming in back to back, just tons of speed right before, some of your pop comes in. And especially depending on who they can add in free agency, if they can add a little bit of power with guys like you said, Santander and, or Adames, Kim, whoever, it'd be really nice addition to the bottom of the lineup. But, like some of these guys are mentioning, he definitely needs to bring the Ks down. But going back to Jacob Young, McCray has a way higher ceiling. So if you can give that guy a little bit of time to adjust to the league. I mean, he's shown us some really nice glimpses. He actually, in a very small sample size in the big leagues this year, already has more home runs than Jacob Young has in the entire season as a starting center fielder. He has 5 and Jacob Young has 3, and Young has 32 bags. I can easily see McCray clearing that as long as he can get on base at like a 310, 320 clip even. I could see him clearing that. So,
but here's the thing with McCray, all these, these things that are being said as far as, over swinging and has too long of a swing and whiff rates and whatnot. All of this is mechanical that can be adjusted. He's 22, 23 years old. He wasn't expected to make his debut this season. And maybe 24. Yeah. He wasn't expected to make his debut this season. And he was projected 2025 ETA. So it's like these little things are all these mechanical things are all things that can be worked on and be developed. But the things that you can't teach is defensive instincts and speed and, pop. All those things are just naturally gifted to him. And that's the whole point that I'm making. It's like, if you get him batting like a Mike Yastrzemski 230 with 17 home runs and 49, 50 RBIs, but he's 23 and making, a million, making chump change. It's like, if you can get that kind of production, what's the point of having a Yastrzemski on the team? Like, that's just the way my mind works. It's like, okay, yeah, he's got flaws in his bat, in his swing. He wasn't known for that coming up, through the minors. Yeah. But those are things that can be worked on and adjusted to make him at least like a semi-average hitter.
Yeah. Here, George, I'm gonna come back to your comment in a second. Frederick mentioned, he did correct himself. He said it's 110. He said 80 WRC plus versus 120 is a big difference. You're right, it is. I think the big thing that could offset it is, yes, Yaz is a really great defensive right fielder. Like, he's probably going to be a finalist for a Gold Glove, or at least he might be. Grant McCray simply has more range. And the other part that could offset is, as Ricky mentioned, he could swipe you 40 bags if he's playing every day. So, like, they're not exactly the same player. There are a lot of similarities, like Dan was saying, but Yaz is going to strike out a little less. He'll probably hit a little better, and Grant, or maybe a lot better. But Grant also, when he gets on, he can wreak havoc. He can steal you some bags. He can create runs. We saw what happened with him in the Baltimore game a few days ago, where he had 2 singles, 2 walks, stole a bag. He was just all over the place and scored a couple runs. And that's the kind of stuff where he could have significant value. And then, as George said, this is what I had about before, McCray has too long of a swing, is unable to catch up to high fastball and over swings and changeup. He needs to learn to push, drag, bunt, needs to learn to shorten his swing. I mean, I would agree with that. Like, I think if they flatten his swing path and shorten it up a little bit, he creates a ton of torque. Like, he'll backspin a few out, even if he has a flatter swing path. Like, I mean, you see the home runs he hits. Like, he doesn't hit cheap ones. Like, their second deck, like, he absolutely crushes the ball. But I do agree, like, he probably should shorten up a little bit, because for a guy like him, even if he hits 240, 250, he could hit just a ton of doubles and triples, especially in Oracle. And if he can get that walk rate up, around 10%, and like Ricky said, get on base at a 310, 320 clip, something like that, he'll swipe you a ton of bags. And he would have incredible value to this team if he's doing that, because they've got to find a way to create more runs on this team and with this offense. So
And that's why I say I like him in the 9 hole because, something we've talked about is getting back to not only the bunting, but putting on more hit and runs. I like McCray in the 9 hole because when Lee does come back, hypothetically, you put, if McCray can get on first, you can put him in those situations and have Lee trying to attack that hole, between first and second base consistently. Because the thing is, I mean, we probably can't expect high stolen base numbers out of Lee. We saw that he was kind of reluctant to steal a ton of bags at times, even though he does have the speed. It just doesn't seem like a huge part of his game. So if you can put McCray, in front of him in certain situations in the 9 hole, and then put on hit and runs, like that could manufacture you a run when you're stuck at the bottom of the order and help you get into the top when you start having your run producers come up in the 2, 3, 4 spots. So I think that would be huge rather than having a guy sitting at the bottom who, could be like a Yaz who's really not giving you the consistent power that you think he has, because we see it this year. His numbers are going to be extremely inflated. He's going to end up finishing with 17 to 20 bombs, but yet 3/4 of his home runs are going to end up coming in the last 2 months of the season. I mean, the guy had 7 bombs, I think, in like late July, early August, and now he's up to 17. It's like ridiculous. So, and McCray has the same kind of home run potential as Yaz, honestly. I wouldn't say up in the 30s, but you can absolutely see McCray in a couple of years being a guy who could hit 15 to 20 bombs, which is what you're pretty much getting out of Yaz. You bring those power numbers down a little bit, make him bunt and make a little bit more contact, and you'll take that out of the bottom of the order.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, though, is like you said, you got to beef up the heart of the lineup. It's just, you have to, man. And that's something we're going to touch on. Yeah. It's like there's guys out there that you can sign that'll get you, this season, Santander and Adames have a combined, 60 bombs between the two? Just about. So it's like, those are 2 guys you can get to instantly beef up the heart of the lineup, because this consistent, this daily output of, all right, you're going to get Bailey in the 5 hole. You're going to Bailey in the 5 hole, Conforto at cleanup, and is batting 6th. Like that's not cutting it, man. So it's like,
absolutely. Yeah, I think did you say Santander and Adames?
Yeah,
I think they're like 70, 72 or something like that. I mean, Santander's got 42 by himself.
Jeez,
I think Adames is pushing 30.
I thought Adames was like 28, something like that.
Adames has 32.
Oh, see, I'm an idiot. Jeez.
74 between the two of them. And I mean, Santander, don't get me wrong, everyone. Santander, I would not count on hitting 40 plus in San Francisco. But
30
as I've said many times, and I continue to say, because a lot of people are like, I don't like him because he's a 1 year, it's a contract year. It's like, look at his 2022 and 2023. Average 30 homers, average 32 doubles, average like 92 RBIs. I will take 90% of that production, and be just thrilled. So,
dude, at this point, I'd take 75% of that production. Shoot.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about the huge power numbers, like the 40 bombs. Like, I will take a guy that hits 25 to 28 bombs and is a run producer. Like, we like Chapman's power numbers. He's had a pretty solid offensive season for his standards the last few years. But if you have a guy that can produce runs a little bit better than Chapman even, and do a little bit better job with runners in scoring position or guys on third with less than 2 outs and getting those sac flies in, late in games, that cost the Giants a ton of games this year. So just that alone, that extra, 15 to 20 RBIs just from, good situational hitting would make a huge difference in this lineup, especially through the middle. And then, like we said, if you can just add a little bit of speed, you're going to manufacture a lot more runs and not be so home run dependent.
Yeah, and here's the thing with those 2 guys in particular, Santander and Adames. 2 of the best things they excel at. Santander, like you guys touched on, he's got great pop, but he's great at producing runs, and he's a switch hitter, which is something that the team desperately needs because our switch hitter right now is Patrick Bailey, and you don't want to get me on that rant. But then you go to Adames. What is one of his best things that he brings, one of his best tangibles that he brings to a lineup? He is elite with runners in scoring position. What was one of the biggest things that affected this team this season? Runners in scoring position. So it's like you're a team that lacks power, lacks run producing, lacks switch hitting, and lacks runners in scoring position ability in your lineup. You got two guys that are available on the market that you can easily sign that can address those issues right away. So I don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't pursue them.
Yep. So I pulled up Santander's home run expectancy by park, which whatever y'all can do what you want with this information. I don't take it like it's the gospel or anything like that. But obviously this year there'd be an expectancy that he would have only hit 31 in Oracle. Now keep in mind, the Giants don't play 162 games in Oracle Park. Half of them are on the road. So, but last year he hit 29. Expectancy would have been 27. The year before he hit 33. It actually was higher. His expectancy was 35. I do like that he's a switch hitter. I like that, he's not, they need lefty power, but I do like that he's a switch hitter because then it's not going to be like if all his power is to right center field, you know what I mean? He's not going to just get crushed in this park. So, he'd be fine. As kind of Grant said, or not, it wasn't Grant. It was George said earlier, if he hit 24 to 28, and you guys said it as well, with 85-ish runs, 90 runs or RBIs, we'd take that. Like, we would be thrilled with that, hitting fifth or in this lineup or sixth in this lineup. Part of getting a guy like him, and this is the same reason we've been pushing for Adames, is it's not just for your production next season. If we have hopes that Bryce Eldridge is going to be up as soon as opening day next season or early next season, or even if it's a later part of next season, or even if it's 2026, he needs some protection in this lineup. Like, we can't just have no one behind him and be like, Matt Chapman's going to be your protection. Don't worry. It's like that can't be all he has behind him. We've got to get someone that's going to punish teams for pitching around him if he's as good as we hope, or at least get him some better pitches to hit. So, but I just thought this was interesting. I'm going to pull up Adames's here in a second and I'll share that.
Another thing on Santander too is his splits are not power wise, but his production's pretty even across the board versus lefties and righties. He's kind of like think of Pablo. He was very good as a left-handed hitter, had a lot more pop, but from the right side early on in his career, he still hit for a pretty high average and still could make good contact. That's kind of how Santander is. His OPS is in like the low to mid 800s from both sides of the plate. Significantly more power as a lefty hitter than from the right side, but either way, you're not really worried about one side where you're like, oh, here we go again, another platoon situation in the outfield. That's not how this dude is at all. He's still going to drive in runs from both sides of the plate.
Absolutely. And just because I said I would share it, here you go, everyone. A little similar story with Adames. Expectancy would be a little lower. It's actually dead on this season, 32. Last season, it would have been quite a bit lower. He had kind of a down year in 2023. A few years ago, a couple shy, at most years it's a little lower, but I don't think with Adames you're making that deal trying to sign a guy for strictly his power. Like, we're not looking at a guy like him because we want to get a 30 home run guy. To me, you're doing it for the guy he's been with runners in scoring position. You're doing it to get a guy that for 2 of the last 3 years has hit over 300 with runners in scoring position. And even last year where he hit, I think 246, he had like an 860 OPS with runners in scoring position. So he was still doing some damage. He, as you guys mentioned, he's a run producer. I'm kind of transitioning us into our shortstop talk here. But he's a run producer, and it's a position of, I think it's a very important position of need for this team going forward. And we're going to dive into kind of what's on the farm for shortstops here. But I think it's pretty clear as far as when we talk about the major league team, they don't have a pure shortstop right now. I mean, everyone can talk about it being Fitzgerald's natural position. He is not an everyday shortstop. I mean, I know, Ricky, you got strong feelings. I'll turn it to you in a minute, but this guy, I don't mind him starting there occasionally. I don't mind Wisely starting there occasionally. I don't, even Schmidt, if they needed to start him in a spot, started short. I really don't mind these guys as like an occasional starter there. But if you're going to play Fitzgerald every day, he needs to either be a second base every day, or you need to play him like Ben Zobrist and just be like, you're going to give a guy a day off like every day. You're going to play every day, and you're just going to like rotate who gets days off. And like, that's to me what you have to do with Fitz. Now, I also have concerns with Fitz as far as if he can sustain what he's done. I do think those numbers are going to settle in quite a bit lower than what we've seen. I think similar to how when Ramos was hitting 300, we were all kind of like, yeah, it's probably going to be like 270, 280 when it's all said and done. And I think the finger injuries kind of impacted him. You look at a guy like Fitzgerald, he's striking out at almost 31% of the time. Teams have figured out to just pound sliders down in the zone. The power has pretty much disappeared. I still love what he's shown with the speed, but to me, like, I'm not moving off of him as an everyday player. I just can't say do it at short, because what we've seen defensively for the last, month and a half has been pretty atrocious. It's been bad. And a lot of people pointed out to me on X like a week or two ago. They were like, well, he was like really good, a lot of outs above average and DRS and whatever for like the first couple months. And it's like, great, large sample size, guys. Like, we got to look at it over a big sample size. And right now, over a big sample size, he's probably a hair below average, maybe about average. So I think you got to move on to another shortstop and then figure out where you're going to play Fitzgerald going forward. And then I'll let Ricky give kind of his thoughts, and Dan, you too. And then I'm going to kind of talk about why I like Adames as an option, given especially what we've got on the farm right now.
Yeah.
So
regarding Fitzgerald, I want to start out with his hitting first. With his hitting, I think he's kind of turning into more of who I think we all kind of thought he was all along. I mean, we've kind of talked about his power numbers in the minors. He showed off pretty good power consistently throughout the minors, but you look at him being, at one point on pace for 20 home runs this year in the big leagues, and I think we kind of all agree that didn't really seem like a guy you'd see hitting 20 bombs consistently in the majors year in, year out. Didn't really seem like that type of guy to me. He went on that huge home run hitting streak. I personally have felt all along that in the big leagues, he's more of a guy that would probably top out between 15 and 18, and that's a pretty good ceiling for him. And defensively, I think we've all along kind of felt like he's more of a utility guy. That's how he's been all throughout the minors. They converted him to outfield to get him to play multiple positions to try to get him up here quicker. And I think that's ultimately what we've kind of seen. Right now, he's trending more towards like a 750 to 780 OPS type hitter, and I think that's totally fine. You can totally win with that. He's got good speed. I do think defensively he does bring a ton of value to the table, more as a utility guy, where he's not, getting so much action like he is currently as the starting shortstop. But I do think that we do have to realize they absolutely need a defensive upgrade at that position. He just does not look super comfortable. I think he has the ability to play the position. I just don't think it's going to work out long term for him there. He almost cost the Giants the game tonight at short. Doval, as horrible as he looked at times in the ninth tonight, he basically got a routine double play, what would have been a double play to end the game, and Fitzgerald just totally double clutched, couldn't get a good grip on the ball, didn't get the throw off in time to even get the out at second. And it's like, you're a big league shortstop. You need to get a grip on the ball, and you need to fire it over to first if you're not going to be able to get that easy out at second. You need to make something happen with one out in the ninth with two guys on base. You have to get an out there. And what ended up happening is Doval luckily, got the sac fly out and they had a 2-run cushion. But in a 1-run game, you cannot afford to have your starting shortstop looking like that, especially if you want to be a team that gets into the playoffs. I could only imagine how Giants fans would be reacting if they were in the playoffs and some kind of crucial error like that came up because of who we had at shortstop defensively, and that cost you a playoff game. You just can't have that. We've heard complaints all year long about, Luciano and small sample sizes making the same types of errors, and yet here we are with Fitzgerald with 14 errors or 13 errors, something like that on the season, and he hasn't even been the full-time starting shortstop. That's just way too much.
I think that was number 11 at short.
Yeah.
Or 12. A couple,
That's
at
a
least
lot.
2 were at a different position. I don't remember where, but
Here's the thing.
it's way too much for a part-time. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Fitzgerald has the ability to fill in at shortstop. He should not be the shortstop. Fitzgerald has the ability to fill in at second base. I don't think he should be the second baseman. He has the ability to fill in the outfield. He shouldn't be the outfielder. He is defensively a utility player. He's got some high upside with the bat. He's shown it. He's went on those little stretches. I think there's a lot of good in Fitzgerald, but we were blessed for a decade plus of elite shortstop play from Crawford. And since then, the Giants have struggled finding an identity for the shortstop position. Yes, I give Farhan credit because he went all out for – yes, that's a fact. He went all out for Correa for an insane contract, which he bid on, and then obviously that fell apart. And then scrambled after that, you had – Ahmed, and then you had, Luciano situation, then you've had Wisely there, then you've had Fitzgerald there. And it's like you're trying to band-aid this position that you need to solidify. And I think this is the offseason you got to do it. And if you want my opinion, if Barhan's still the president of baseball operations going into the offseason, I'm 95% the opening day shortstop next season is going to be Hassan Kim. I think he's infatuated by him for whatever reason. I don't mind the guy. I just don't think he's worth a huge contract. And I think there's clearly a better option / options available out there this offseason that you should probably focus on first. But I'm pretty sure they're going to go after Kim. But yeah, dude, I mean, if you can land Adames, you go after Adames. He's going to fill in that role for years to come. He's going to provide a lot of upside with the bat, which you desperately need. And then I saw a couple people mention Bo Bichette. I don't really understand the Bichette hate. I know he had a rough year this season. He was banged up by multiple injuries. But if you look at his last 3 full seasons, he's been one of the better hitters in all the league. So if you have a chance to get a Bichette, if Adames falls through, you go after a Bichette.
I mean, I'll ask everyone regarding Bichette, and sorry to interrupt, but
you're good.
What's more likely? Bichette is actually the guy that for 3 straight years was like one of the best hitters in baseball, or at 26 years old, he just completely forgot how to hit.
Yeah.
Like, what's more likely, everyone, for going forward?
Yeah.
So, all right, go ahead.
No, it's true. No, that was pretty much the end of my spiel. It's like I think the priority's got to be Adames number 1, like Bichette number 2, Kim number 3. You gotta have backup options because I just don't think you go in next season with Fitzgerald as your starting shortstop. Because like you said, Rick, with like defensively speaking, you cannot afford to have a guy that can make these types of blunders.
Yeah, I think you can live with Fitz as your starting second baseman for a year. I don't see him being the long-term solution there either. Again, it's more of a situation of find a way to play him 4 times a week or 5 times a week and bounce him around. Have him relieve a guy in the outfield for a day a week. Have him go and relieve a guy at second, a guy at short. You could DH him if he's on a hot streak. I could see him even getting some run at first base in the future. That's kind of the route I would go. I think he has, like I said, I think he has all the ability in the world to play short. He has the range. He has the arm. That's neither of those things are an issue. It's just it does not look like his natural position. So I think you're a lot better off with giving him a little bit more time to get throws off at second base, at least going into next year.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna go turn this into I mentioned the Giants farm, and I'm gonna go into what's up, Kyle. I'm gonna go into kind of why Adamas makes sense from more than just a production standpoint, because I think we all kind of know what he can do, and I think while he's not necessarily a star by any stretch, um, I don't even think he's made an All-Star. Maybe he's made one, but he's a winner. He's a very highly productive player. He's been a very good defensive shortstop for a long time. This year, don't look at his defensive run save, though. I don't know what's going on with him in Milwaukee, but he's having a rough year. But historically, he's been a really good defensive shortstop. And he's been a great run producer. He drives in a ton of runs. He'd be a guy that you could put in the 5-hole and you feel really good about it. But part of the reason why I don't mind handing a guy like Adamas a 6 or 7 year contract, because that's realistically what it's going to take. I kind of wonder if the Dansby Swanson deal gets it done with him. I don't know if it would or not, but the 7 for 175. I mean, maybe you go up to 7 for Dan. Maybe were you the one that suggested 7 for 190, or someone did? Like maybe you go up a little bit to try and close the deal. I agree with you guys. Kim, I think he's a nice player. I don't think he would get the contract. I don't necessarily think he'll get the deal we're worried about, but he would bring something productive to this team. Like, he does bring more contact oriented. He's not going to hit for a high average. He does draw a ton of walks, steals bags. Like, there are good things he does, and he's good defensively. But I would focus more on Adamas. And part of that is because, like I mentioned earlier, the Giants farm system right now, if you look at it, right now up in the majors, we've got Schmidt, who's not a shortstop. We've got Wisely, who's really not a shortstop. We've got Fitzgerald, who's not a shortstop. You go to Sacramento, you have like Will Wilson. Like, that dude's going to be out of the league in a year or two. And you go down to Richmond, you have maybe Diego Velasquez, who I think most people feel like he's better suited for second base, myself included. I think he could, similar to Fitz, I think he could fill in, but I don't think he should play short. He should be a second baseman. And then you go down to, Eugene, and you have Arteaga and Cole Foster, and Cole Foster hasn't figured out hitting. Arteaga, the bat is a big question mark. He had thoracic outlet this season. He's got some nice power. His glove is phenomenal. Same with Maui Ahuna. Their gloves are phenomenal, but we don't know if they're going to hit or not. And then, down in San Jose, you have Ahuna and you have Walker Martin, who there's already a lot of talk that he might have to move either second or third. And also, he's got a ton of swing and miss right now that he's going to have to figure out in the offseason and going into next season. So there's just a ton of question marks at shortstop in particular, up and down the farm. The best we have right now for hope for shortstop is a 17-year-old in the DSL in Johnny Level, who's gotten like Rafael Furcal comparisons, and a guy we haven't even signed yet because everyone's all excited about, Joshua De Jesus Gonzalez, who might be the number one international prospect next season and is going to be 16 next season when they sign him, assuming that does go through. And to me, you just look at that gap at shortstop and it's like, okay, do we care if we give Adamas 6 or 7 years? Because we don't exactly have anything on the horizon at that position that looks like it's coming.
Yeah, that's why I say you have to address that position long term this offseason.
Yeah.
Like, these little band-aids they've done the last couple of years, this last year or two, is not going to cut it going forward for the reasons that you said.
And to add on to all that, you look at their draft class this year, and the earliest picks they invested in the shortstop position were in the 9th and 12th rounds. So, and I actually like those two guys that they picked in those two spots. They have some nice upside, but you're really looking at one of them being a solid defensive shortstop, and there's still some questions with his bat in Zane Zielinski. We haven't even seen him in the minors yet. So you really have nothing. It's kind of like what I've said in previous shows about the catching position too. Everybody loves Patrick Bailey, but behind him there is absolutely nothing in the system. And that's kind of why I wanted them to draft somebody high at that position. And it was something that nobody was really talking about with this year's draft is you need to invest in that position. Both catching and shortstop, it's kind of like in the NFL with running backs. You need to be drafting them like every single year, and because those positions are, just so important at short and catcher. So
That's why I
getting a
want
guy
to
like
get Darno.
Adames would be huge.
Yeah, that's why I want to sign Darno. Like, if you could platoon Darno with Bailey this year, that's awesome. Especially, like you said, there's no depth behind Patrick Bailey. And Tom Murphy's probably going to retire. And the way you got Jackson Reitz and Blake Sable, and then that's about it. So it's like, go after Darno. I don't know why nobody's talking about it, but that should be priority number 2 or 3 at least this offseason.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear they're committed to Bailey long term, but they've got to get him some help back there. They can't. He cannot be starting as much as he is. Like going into next season, they got to get someone that can at least start like 30% of the games.
That's the crazy thing. He's not even starting a lot.
Well, he's playing like every game though. They're not even giving him full days off. Like they put Casali in there, and then they either pinch hit him or defensive sub him in the 7th, and it's like, I get it's only like 3 innings, but when you're like literally not getting any days off at that position, it just adds up. Like that's the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know how I feel about Patrick Bailey, so I'm not going to talk about
it. Yeah, Grant. Trust me, man. We all feel that. Yeah. I've been joking that the Giants are going to – I don't know that much about the next draft. I can't say I follow the prospects going, this early that much. But I've always joked that the Giants are going to end up with the number 2 pick this year, and it's going to be another draft where there's like one good player.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think the narrative at the catching position will change dramatically if Farhan does indeed get canned, by the end of this season or early in the offseason. I think we're going to see narratives completely change in this organization if they do go a different route. Yeah. Because, I mean, you bring in a new manager, a new president, and a new GM, and you will see things quickly change. And we know how our local media works out here. Everything is very just hardcore backing the front office because we're too afraid of, going against the grain. And you notice everything's just it's a huge echo chamber. How long did it take this season before we finally saw people give their honest opinions? Literally almost everybody in the local media that covers the Giants, there was nobody hardly that wanted to say anything outside of Baggerly occasionally. He's like one of the few that will actually give honest takes. And then it's like all at once, everybody starts really putting the heat down once they start hearing these rumors swirl around about the potential of Farhan, going away this year. Then all of a sudden, everybody starts giving their honest opinions. So I think very quickly, if we see, Bailey get off to a bad start next year, I mean, the draft comes around in the middle of the season. Don't be surprised if it's, a Joey Bart 2.0 situation where, only a couple years in, we're drafting another catcher high in the draft, And, I'm not trying to go on the Bailey tangent again here because we do it all the time. But, don't be surprised. Things change very quickly, and it's the big leagues. You're not going to be able to just put out, 0 offensive production and that be acceptable out of a starting position.
Absolutely. I mean, what's he at now? I mean, I'm pulling up his box score today because I think he did have an RBI single. I'll give him credit. And you know what? Against Baltimore, he hit a couple balls hard. He had, I'll say this: Bailey's at bats the last 2 weeks have looked significantly better, but at the end of the day, it's the results that matter, and they just aren't quite there. He's hitting 234 with a 632 OPS.
And mind you, that's after hitting 330 this month. Yeah. So it's don't get me started. Don't get me started.
I think taking a college shortstop and a college catcher should be on the list of the first 4 or 5 rounds next season. You've got to get a couple in the system. And they tried that last season with Ahuna and Foster. It hasn't worked out. yet. So, I mean, I will give them credit at that position that they attempted to address that, but it's you got to hit on someone because they need some more depth at those positions. Because right now it's just I don't like having just a whole bunch of guys that are like coming through that you don't feel good about starting every day in a scenario where you have to. Like right now, I'm going to be honest. If Chapman were to get God forbid, because I mean, I'm not rooting this on anybody, but like if Chapman were to get injured, I get the whole bat that Casey Schmidt has, what he's shown at this point in his career hasn't been, it's left a lot to be desired, but I would feel damn good about Casey Schmidt playing third base. Like, I would not have a single concern about his defense over there. For anybody that's watched him the last couple of games, that's how he's looked at in Sacramento all season. I have said it so many times that I think part of the issues with what people have with Casey Schmidt's bat stems from the fact that he's just kind of average to below average at shortstop and second base. So the defense hasn't really shown through with him. Everybody's only gotten to see him struggle at the plate and then play kind of okay defense. Had he been looking like this at third base, I feel like people would have been more patient with his bat. Now we would have all been saying the same things as far as like it needs work, but I don't think everyone would be like, this guy sucks. Like I hear all the time. So like he's a stud defensively and he can do everything Chapman can over there. I said it. I know someone's going to probably hate me for that, but he can. Been watching it. So.
Yeah, the other issue I find too is that a lot of these guys that the Giants have taken at the shortstop position in previous drafts and internationally is most of them, like Fitz, are not true shortstops. These are not guys. You can see it early on in the minors, in the lower levels down in San Jose and Eugene. Like these guys are not going to be long-term answers there defensively. It's like you're looking at an average shortstop defensively at best at the major league level. And some of these guys are like high floor bats, but they're not, real high ceiling. Like we mentioned, Diego, he's another guy I feel like is more suited as a long-term utility guy. And it just seems like that's a lot of what they've been drafting in the last few years. It's like, we're not really drafting for upside. We're drafting for high floors. And then it's like that high floor player comes around, they look like an okay MLB bat in the future. But then we're already finding out in low A and high A that, okay, well, this isn't going to be the guy at shortstop either. So they really need to change their approach there.
I think that's kind of like, that's been Farhan's MO. Like since he came in, it was about getting the most, it is about quantity over quality to an extent, because he focused more on, okay, how can I get, these players that can play multiple positions. I mean, he took an emphasis on wanting two-way players, with the Reggie Crawford, Bryce Eldridge signings. And then, okay, the Brett Wisleys, the Tyler Fitzgeralds, going after these guys that can play multiple positions and having them on the big league roster. The Wade Mecklers, like, he takes pride in getting player that can, play multiple positions for whatever reason. And to an extent, like that's a good thing to have. But when you're constructing your entire 40 man roster and, minor league teams out of, 70% of them are utility guys, essentially, it's like, it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, I don't like that they have not let guys, properly develop. I made the comment earlier with Fitz, like jack of all trades, master of none. I feel like even guys like Schmidt that really could be a master at third base, like even before Chapman, they were jerking him around, playing him at short, second. They were trying to teach him all these positions. And it's like, this guy has Gold Glove potential at third. Why are we doing this? Just let him play third. Like that's what he is. And yes, now it could potentially keep him, keep his future in San Francisco to an extent. If his bat comes around a little bit to where he can be a utility guy and, he can play second, he can play short, he can give Chapman a day off at third occasionally. And then in the event, like if something happens with Chapman where he has, he's been pretty durable in his career, but he has had times where he's missed 20, 30 games. Like if something like that happens, you feel good about, like, you're going to be like, we're going to sacrifice almost nothing defensively and put Schmidt over there and be just fine. But it's just, it's unfortunate for him. To me, like I said earlier, I just feel like it's sad because he hasn't gotten to shine through like his full capabilities to Giants fans, unless you do watch him in Sacramento, like I do, like Ricky does. I don't know if Dan, if you watch a lot of AAA, but like, unless you get to actually watch those games, you don't really get to see what he actually can do, because they haven't given him that opportunity in the majors to do it at his spot. So it is nice what he's doing. Chapman is supposed to be back, I think, tomorrow, although I guess they bumped the game up a little bit. So we might see Schmidt again. We might see Chapman. I said they should just let Chapman go be with his kid for the last week and let Schmidt play. If anything, if he had a good week, there might be a little more trade value there.
I was going to say, you know what's really going to piss a few people off tomorrow if Chapman comes back? And you know what I'm getting at. I have a strong feeling, and I want to be wrong, but I have a strong feeling that the move when Chapman is reinstated is going to be Luciano back to Sacramento and leave Donnie freaking Waltman on the roster. I feel it coming.
I'm so
Donnie
done
Barrels.
with Donnie Walton. I kind of went off on Donnie yesterday after he failed to get a bunt down 2 straight times. I'm like,
rightfully so.
Why? I get Luciano struggling, but for anybody that's subscribed to The Athletic, check out the Grant Brisbee article.
Yeah.
I mean, he hits the nail right on the head with that, where it's like, these games don't matter. Like, I cannot stress that enough. We're playing for pride here. Like, at the end of the day, the Giants had an opportunity where the games flat ass did not matter for a month almost. And they could have just let Luciano go out there. And, as Brisbee says, he could have kicked a dozen balls. No one cares. Yeah, a lot of people on Twitter are up in arms, but like, he could have kicked balls. He could have whatever. Just let his bat play.
Because here's the thing:
improve or show something.
If that happens, if he kicks 12 balls and he bats 120 with 25 strikeouts in the month of September, great. You know what you have in the guy. You gave it a chance. You gave him a full month. You can look into moving on to the offseason, because now what's going to happen is you're going into another offseason. You're going into another year where you still don't know what you have in one of your former top prospects. And it's just infuriating. And I get people get upset because, he hasn't shown much, and he's a defensive liability. It's like, that's great. We've seen it in a handful of opportunities. He had 80 at-bats, something like that, going into the season. And he's gotten
40 in the majors. He had like 90 in the upper levels, or 100 in the upper levels total.
See, that's my thing. So it's like, dude, just deal with it. These games don't matter, like you touched on. I get, Bo Mel still wants to win and wants to roll the best lineup to have the best, chance to win possible. But it's like, dude, we're going into 2025 and you still don't know what you have in Marco Luciano.
Yeah.
You still don't really know what you have in Luis Matos. And you're about to waste their option years. Like, come on, man. What are we doing here?
Well, and you know what? Even if, and I'll turn it over to Ricky here in like just 1 second, even if he needs to go back to AAA next season and keep developing down there, which is fine, like if that's the case, like check these numbers. 227 average, 305 on base, 349 slug, 654 OPS with 11 home runs, 17 doubles, 3 triples in 427 at bats.
That's better than Patrick.
Anybody
Bailey.
know who that was? Does anybody know who that was? That was Elliot Ramos 2 years ago in Sacramento. At 22 years old, the same age Marco Luciano is right now. He Bub says he's messed in the head. He might be right now. Like, they're not playing him every day. Like, that's part of the problem. And if anybody that listened to Bryce Eldridge did like a little quick interview with some of the AAA people yesterday, and he was talking about just how beneficial playing every single day has been to him this season and his growth. Like, it matters. And Luciano's playing like 2 days in a row, and then he sits for 3 days, and he plays a day, and then he gets a day off. And it's like, he's not playing every day right now. And yeah, he might be overmatched currently in the majors, but as Ramos kind of showed, you can develop, like you can get better. He has another option year, which they're going to reach the point of kind of crap or get off the pot, like we've talked about, but they do have that option year, or they could use him as a trade piece, or maybe they put him down and he does well, or maybe he just never develops here. They might just run out of time in San Francisco and hit a point where they do need to like they need to move on. But I hate seeing comments about how like this guy sucks and he can't get better. And it's like he's 22. I don't get it. And you have a walking proof on the roster right now that he can. Whether he does or not, I don't know. But there is a guy that looked just like him, that was a top prospect, just like him, that maybe not to the extent, because I think Ramos peaked in like the 60s on the top 100 list, but, similar.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Ricky. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I really think from the start of this offseason to next trade deadline, I think it's time to really start hardcore evaluating these guys and make a firm decision, go one way or go the other. You have Schmidt, Matos, and Luciano all have 2 minor league options left. You absolutely need to get an answer immediately on all 3 of these guys on what you're going to do with them. Are they guys you're going to write it out with, or are they guys you're going to waste their time with? If it's option B, start figuring out trade scenarios for them and think about what route you're going to go, going into next season, because Schmidt, especially with a guy like him being a little bit older of a prospect, being a college guy, I'm kind of at the point where with Tyler Fitzgerald, if he ends up having a nice start to next season, he looks like a steady major league hitter, you need to get Schmidt shipped out by next year, early on in the year, before his value just completely bottoms out, because that has been the number one issue with Farhan when it comes to these young guys. Joey Bart is example number 1 right there. Like, you cannot have all your value bottom out, and it's the same thing with these guys on short-term deals like Snell, Gosman, all these guys, Bumgarner, all these guys that have expiring deals that you're not shipping out and you're not getting any value for. It's the same thing with these prospects. They're all assets at the end of the day. They do not need to be guys that eventually contribute to the major league team, but if they're not going to be, you need to evaluate early on if they're not that guy and get some sort of value for them. Even if it's a relief pitcher, a middle relief pitcher, find some kind of value in these guys. You're investing high picks and a ton of international money in these guys. You have to decide what direction you're going with these guys, big time. And like Dan said, all these guys were huge question marks going into the season, and we've gotten 0 answers in a season where we'd be damn lucky at this point to get to 81 wins, and we got no answers. You didn't get an answer on Matos, Schmidt, Luciano. You still don't know what the future of Kyle Harrison looks like. Wisenhunt had a very questionable year. You got nothing out of Roop or Black. You have no clue what you have there. You're barely seeing them now in September, which cool, but you didn't get any evaluation on them really, other than a little bit of a sample size from Roop in AAA, and then a down year from Black in AAA. But all the
Roop's
way across
actually been
the board,
pretty solid in the majors this season.
Yeah. And then Black looks like he might be turning a corner as well. Hopefully he can take that into next year. But it's like all these guys, they're just all unknowns at this point. I like the potential with all of them, but you've wasted a year on a 75 to 80 win season with no answers at all, other than, hey, we've got a long-term third baseman. That's about it.
Exactly.
I mean, what the team's 74 and 79? No, 75 and 79.
Yes.
So I mean, they've got to go 6-2 to finish the season, playing Kansas City. What is it? Arizona next? Is that next?
Yeah.
And then finishing it at home against St. Louis. You have to go 6-2 to finish 500. 7-1 to finish over. I mean, I said I had them pegged for like 77 wins. To their credit, they won a series in Baltimore, and they've now taken the first game in Kansas City. I love that they're showing some pride. Yeah, Grant, I'm a believer in Beck. Unfortunately, he had that arm aneurysm. That sucked for him. I think he's an awesome reliever, kind of a glue guy, as I've mentioned earlier in the year. But yeah, I mean, Ricky's right. Like we've gotten incomplete evaluations, at least. Like we've gotten some. We don't know with Harrison if he's gonna, what he'll be next season. Hopefully he's a little more built up. A lot of guys are reaching their innings, their career high in innings. I'm not sure what Birdsong's at, but he's got to be pushing close to 130 at this point. Same with Black. He's probably pushing pretty close. Roop, unfortunately, kind of got dinged up. I don't know. I like what I've seen out of him as a potential starter. The problem is I don't know if he could stay healthy enough. He had back problems last season, and then he's having a little bit more issues this year. He might be a guy that's stuck in the pen because he's never able to stay healthy enough to, build up the endurance as a starter. But I like what I've seen out of him at least. But yeah, I mean, it's just a ton of question marks. And, like you said, there's almost more questions than answers in especially the middle infield. I mean, we've got a third baseman and we've got a corner outfielder. That's like all we feel great about right now is Ramos and, even Chapman. We know we got those two. And it's like, okay, we've got a couple pieces. We've got a couple people to build around and a few bullpen pieces that look pretty solid. But it's just,
yeah. And hey, unfortunate. We still don't really know what we have in Lee either. He showed glimpses, but it wasn't like amazing. I'm a believer in Lee personally, but he's still another question mark. And that was out of, Farhan and Patia's, control, a freak injury like that. But you still don't really know if he's like a guy, He might just be a solid, average, everyday player, but he might not be that $100 million guy. So you just really don't know. And I'm not trying to look at the team as a whole, glass half empty, but you do have to ask yourself these questions, like what is the direction going forward? And that's why I think it's so big. You need somebody else in here to really reevaluate what you have here. I look at it like, the D-backs just a few years ago, they were solid, and then they didn't even do a full teardown. They kept a handful of guys, but they really retooled that entire roster. Ketel Marte looked like a guy that was too good for that roster with where they're at. And then within 2 years, it's like, here's Corbin Carroll. We go out and trade for the corner outfielder from the Blue Jays. We add a couple pitchers in free agency. Gallen becomes a guy. It's like next thing you know, you have a squad, but you really need somebody else. Yeah. They have, like you said earlier, they have a true identity. It's behind, speed, athleticism, and a blend of power. And it's just almost all hitting.
And then something underrated for them is they don't strike out. Everyone's like in the teens on their strikeout rate, other than Jock, who's like, even he's only in like the low 20s right now. It's just crazy.
That just actually reminded me, another potential guy, he'd be more of a DH candidate or a first baseman, but I believe Christian Walker's a free agent as well. Big time power. He's been solid for years, and you'd be pulling him away from a division rival. So he's another guy that isn't going to be quite as expensive as some of these other guys we've named, but he could be another guy that could be kind of in that Soler role, except for he's actually a very solid defensive first baseman.
Yeah.
I believe he came up as a catcher, if I'm not mistaken, when he was a little younger. I believe he was a catcher at one point.
Yeah, I like Christian Walker. I think he'd be an awesome pickup on like a 1-year deal. Even if you went 2, he's a little older. That's the only thing. I think he's like 33 or 34 right now. I'm not sure if he'd want to come to San Francisco if he was trying to take like a 1-year deal, because he's definitely not like at the end of his career. That's the issue. But if you can get him, like he's a really solid player. Like he can hit. So and he's a solid defender, like you said. But yeah, everyone, put anything. If you guys have any topics you want us to touch on in the chat, if you guys have any questions, anything you want, fire away. I mean, this is kind of all we had lined up were these kind of topics here. I see we have like 80 something people total watching. I don't know how many of you are on X versus YouTube, but if you're on X, jump on over to YouTube. If you can like the video, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it. I talked I think a week or so ago, my goal was to hit like 700 before the season ends. And I think about a week ago, we got to 700. We're at like 730 something right now. So appreciate your guys' support there. The channel's growing pretty fast. We're going to still have a ton of videos coming out. Even when the season ends, we're one of the few that does put out Giants content year round. So I'll still be dropping videos every week. I don't know if we'll do the live shows every single week, but we'll definitely get them going for the, important stuff in the off season. We'll hop on lives, hopefully we can talk about some big signings, trades, whatever. We have a few other stuff we're working on. I can confirm I don't have a date yet for it. Hopefully next week, I'm going to reach back out to the person this weekend to try and nail down a date, but I have one of the recent draft picks is going to be joining us next week. I'm not going to name names until we get the date and everything confirmed. That will not be a live. I'm not going to subject them to that unless they really, really want to. But yeah, we're looking forward to that one. So, but yeah, anybody just fire away anything you want us to talk about before we hop off. Cause I don't know about you guys. I told my wife 10:30 I'd need to be done for sure, but yeah, but if anybody has anything they want us to touch on.
Rooster, now's your time. If you want us to do the truffle shuffle, speak up.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll have a dance off, Rooster. George, do I think we can get both Bo and Adames? No, I think you're going to get one or the other. Yeah. But
yeah, it's cool. A little redundant.
It'd be cool, but no, they're both shortstops. They're both going to be shortstops, and you're going to get one or the other. It just depends on if you want to go after the free agency signing or if you want to go after the trade. So,
yeah, I definitely think because Ryan earlier, I had it start, I accidentally unstarted, but Ryan mentioned earlier that, and I tried to ask him if he knows where he saw the rumor, but he did mention that there is they're talking about the Giants being really interested in trading for Bo. I'm all for it. If you can't get Adames, I do think you go after Adames first. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't require anything you don't have to give up anything realistically contract wise. Even with Bo's down year, if you're going to try and extend Bo, like they're going to be similar deals. He is younger. He is going to cost something. I like Adames' defense a little better than Bo's in all reality. And I love that Adames has been just an absolute run producer in the middle of the lineup. He's just a money hitter with runners in scoring position. And I think that's something this team needs. So he's just kind of a winner. I like the guy. So
I think it's two very different scenarios with Bo versus Adames. Adames, it's like, this is the guy that's probably more attainable because you can literally just throw the money at him. Bo has one more year where he's arbitration eligible. So you are trading for a guy that's going to be a 1-year rental. And then like Cody said, it really depends on who the Blue Jays are going to want to give up because they seem to keep going back and forth on whether or not they want to keep him long-term or they want to give him up and commit more to Vladdy. Yeah. So it's kind of tough. Is Bo having a down year to the point where you can get him for like Luciano Wisenhunt, like we said at the trade deadline? Is that a realistic scenario, or are they going to want more? Yeah. So it really depends. I think Bo fits this team a lot better long term, just because he's a lot younger. But like some of the guys in the chat are saying, he's not as good defensively and probably would have to move over at some point. So then we keep running down this road of, constantly needing to shift our starting shortstop over to another position. So Adames probably won't need to do that for a few years.
Yeah.
It's tough because, I mean, if Bo goes back to what he was for 3 years, I would absolutely rather have Bo. I mean, that guy's a guy you plug into the 2-hole, and he flat out rakes.
Base of the franchise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a bona fide star. Adames is like a fringe star, but he's very productive and he's a very good player, and he's a legit middle of the order hitter. He's a guy that you could stick behind Eldridge and feel like he has a legit protection. I mean, like I'm not trying to poo-poo on what Adames is. I'm very high on Adames, as everyone here knows. But I think if that's the Bo you're getting, but to Ricky's point, like I don't know how inclined Bo is going to be to sign an extension after coming off the year he's had.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're not going to be able to go in and lowball him. Like, you can't go in there and be like, well, you're coming off hitting 225 and a 600 OPS. Like, we're going to only give you this money. It's like, if you want to extend him, like, you're paying him for what he did the last 3 years, not this season. And it's going to be expensive. And that's a risk because, as much as I've sat here and said, like, what's more likely? Like, we all just saw what he did this year. It is a possibility he's just taken a big dip in production, and this is kind of what he is going forward. I just don't think it's likely. I think he's going to go back. I think he will figure it out. He's too good, too young that I do believe he figures it out. But it's just tough. Like, you can't make that trade without extending him, in my opinion.
Here's my thoughts.
I don't know if he will.
Here's my thoughts. Get one of them.
Yeah, just do it.
Just get one of them. I'm fine with either, or just get one.
Yeah, exactly. My pleasure, George. Rick. Oh, here, I'll do Daniel. Dan, you already kind of answered him. What are realistic options for a second catcher going into next season?
Darno.
Darno is the guy I think all three of us really would like. I'd have to really dig through the free agency options next season.
It's thin.
Yeah, I don't think there's much.
That's why I think Darno has to be a priority. It's like Ricky said
earlier, like it.
No. I'd rather have Hector Sanchez back over Tom Murphy.
I would rather pay Tom Murphy $4 million to go away and sign Eli Whiteside.
Yeah.
From whatever he's doing. He'll probably look the same age as he did when he played.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't think he'd get more gray.
Pedro Feliz.
Yeah, bring Pedro back. Hey, Pablo's pitching.
Our old
Does he want to
emergency
catch again?
catcher.
Does Pablo want to catch again?
Jeez. But no, that's why I think Darno has to be a priority, and it's one that nobody's talking about. But it's for the reasons we've said, like Ricky touched on. Yeah, no minor league depth. And then what me and Cody have talked about for months now, Bailey has shown that he can't catch a full season. He can barely catch 2 months before he's tired. So you got to get somebody into platoon and split time with them. And Bailey's, even though he's not a good hitter by any means, he's better from the left side than he is from the right side.
Yeah. Get
Darno. Have Bailey be an exclusively left-handed hitting catcher, and you plug Darno in against lefties to bat righties. So it's like it's a win-win across the board. So I want Darno badly. If you can land Adames and Darno and get us sometime there, like that's a great offseason in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, even if you got like a pitcher, Adames and Darno, like, I mean, it's not going to be, you're not going to feel like this team is a 90-win team going into next season, but I'd feel like it's a winning team. And then if things go well with young guys, like then maybe the ceiling gets a little higher, but at least it's a solid one. Yeah, we're still kicking there, Ryan. We're going to be hopping off probably within the next 15 though. Rick says, who do you think they will send to the fall league? Eldridge is confirmed.
Bryce.
Yeah, that's already been reported that they're planning to send him to the fall league. It'll be very interesting because sometimes they'll send younger guys that need some, need some more time. I think a guy that's a strong candidate would be an Arteaga who missed so much of the season. I would like to see Walker Martin go to just keep getting experience, but I think he's going to have to. Yeah, I think he's more of a candidate next season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think he's probably a little. He'd get a little overmatched there.
I almost wonder if they would send like a Ryan Reckley because he had kind of a nice bounce back year. He's still younger, but
Yeah.
he's a guy who could really use the work. You know, he's still younger, but he hasn't played a ton of organized ball, you know, since he's been signed.
Here's a
Giants
thought with Tibbs there.
What's that?
If I said, here's a thought, would they send Tibbs there if they felt like he's a guy that can move fast?
Oh, I could absolutely see that.
Yeah.
And last year they sent like 5 or 6 arms, something like that. They sent a ton of guys, not necessarily like the high end guys. I know they sent Bednar and Crawford. They sent Cho before he kind of came on the scene a little bit this year. They sent Lonsway. They sent Hayden Winja. They sent a lot of these guys in like the bottom half of the Giants' top 30. So I could see them sending some younger arms, but probably see a few hitters this year.
What about Diego? They're hoping he might make a
candidate.
Yeah, they're hoping he can make a jump next season. I mean, he showed a lot of great things in Double-A. Had 178 bats or plate appearances. I can't remember which. I think it was plate appearances. But
Diego, Barracoto, Quinn McDaniel. I could see all those guys.
Yeah, Barracoto or Pomaris would make a ton of sense. Bishop even might make sense if they're hoping he can, just keep getting him more experience. They have a lot of great candidates. From the pitching side, I'd be interested. I'm trying to think if there were any pitchers that kind of maybe a Trent Harris if they're trying to push him quick. Reggie Crawford, maybe he goes back next season and pitches if he's healthy. I mean, I don't know. I have no clue what his health looks like right now, but
he was there. Who knows with him, but I could see him going back there again this year. Another guy would be John Michael Bertrand. I could see him. He had a nice year, and he's getting close. He's in SAC now, right? I believe he just got promoted like about 2-3 weeks ago. So he's another guy I could see for sure. He's a nice arm in the system that doesn't get talked about a lot that they might need or might want an extended look at.
Yeah. I mean, Trevor McDonald might go there.
It's another good one for sure.
He missed, I think, a month and a half of the season or so. Maybe they just want to get him an extra 2 or 3 starts where he gets to throw 2 innings, 3 innings, because they usually don't stretch him out that much at that time. But they might just want to see a few more innings out of him. I mean, there's tons of candidates. I don't know Maui Huna's health situation, but
I just think he's just struggled too much for it, honestly.
Yeah. So.
Oh, Whitman would be another one. I could see Joe Whitman going too.
He got shut down at the end of the year.
At the end,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not sure what the case might have been with him, but I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, here's a guy on the major league roster because sometimes you get rehab guys. Could you see Beck got kind of a shortened season? Could you see I don't know where Keaton Wynn stands with his elbow, but there's a few guys that, because like I said, sometimes you get kind of rehab guys. They send them down there to get some games in because of missing time. So anybody else got anything else for us? We got probably like 10 more minutes if you guys have anything, or we'll wrap it up if you don't. So, and Ryan, we will talk about Farhan more next week. I kind of beat that horse a bit the last 2 weeks, so I kind of intentionally steered away from that as much as possible today. We were going to kind of dive in. One of our topics we discussed was diving in on the people that could replace him. We kind of touched on that for a minute earlier, but I think we'll all kind of look a little deeper and see. I think kind of our hope is that maybe Farhan gets fired between now and then, and we can have an actual discussion about something that's, happening. So
Yeah.
I'm calling next Saturday morning, right before the Cardinals game at home, second to last game of the year. Saturday morning, they have a day game that day, and then they'll pack the yard for the last game of the year.
I'm gonna go. What do we got? Yeah, everybody will celebrate. Full house the day after Farhan gets game. That'd be hilarious.
That's a good one.
I'm
Next
calling
Saturday.
Thursday. We're gonna. I'm
That'd
calling
be
Thursday.
early.
We're gonna have an emergency off day pod. Well, think about it. Kepler got
That would
fired on
work.
the Kepler got fired on the off day last year,
He
right
did.
before the Dodger series. I'm going off day. Off day. It's gonna be Black Thursday.
That was
whatever day it is, I'm celebrating. That's all I'm gonna say.
We're all gonna pour shots and raise our glasses.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna pour one out for Farhan.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right. Well,
Joey Bart, this one's for you.
yeah. Salute. Oh God. But yeah. I had to refrain from that comment when they were asking about the ideal backup. I'd be like, oh, that guy in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I had to bite my tongue.
One of the guys in the chat said we should trade for him again. I'm like, oh man, could you imagine if they hired a new president or Patia got promoted and he immediately goes and trades for Joey Bart?
I would love it.
That would have been
Patrick Bailey.
hilarious. Oh my God.
That'd be such a troll move.
What if you just traded Bailey for Bart straight up?
And then what if Farhan goes back to the A's and he's literally like their AGM or their GM? Say if Billy Owens gets hired, he's their new, GM, and then he's out there in Sacramento every day where his old AAA team used to be. That would be hilarious.
God. Dude, I want nothing to do with going to like any games in Sacramento next season. That field is going to be awful. I mean, for anybody, I know a lot of people in here in the chat probably played baseball growing up. For anybody that played turf or played on turf fields in the Bay Area, especially either Central Valley. I grew up in Livermore, so like, a little east where it gets hot. But I remember playing on some turf fields in the middle of July, August, and you feel like your feet are melting underneath you. It's just awful.
Oh yeah, it will melt molded cleats for sure. Yeah. If you're wearing molded, you definitely have to wear spikes. It's not fun.
I played the hot corner in the Central Valley during the summers, and let me tell you, when I would dive on the grass, bro. Oh my gosh,
second-degree burns.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to sit in all the gear. It sucked.
And then there's
when you get two waters and you're like, you drink one and the second one you just do one of these down your shirt because it's so hot.
Yeah, later on when I went strictly to pitching, I didn't have to worry about it too much. But I remember out here at one of our JCs doing tire pulls on the turf out in the summer and literally just feeling like you want to yak, dude. Running 90 feet tire pulls with a weighted vest on. It's awful.
That's gross.
So
I just, to me, because I feel like they could keep a dirt infield and just put turf out in like the outfield or something, but supposedly they want to go full turf, and I just think that's a terrible idea. I mean,
it's just a lot
in the summer. It sucks.
It's totally doable because I mean, even at some of the colleges, you see dirt around home plate, you see it on the mound, and occasionally you'll see it on the infield. But I think teams just don't want to do that and maintain it, and then you have to worry about dirt getting wet and then eventually getting mixed in with the turf, and it's just a lot more of a hassle.
Here's the thing you guys haven't touched on though. It's Sacramento. The elevation's crazy, bro.
If you know, you know.
That's enough.
Yeah, I'm not diving in on that one. I'm not touching it.
I had to. I couldn't pass it up. I had to.
Had to be said.
Man.
But all right, everyone. Well, we're gonna wrap it up. We didn't have any more pop in there, but I appreciate everyone that hopped in here. We got up to like 84 right now watching,
Nice.
so that's awesome. Like I said earlier, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hop on over to the YouTube side. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. As I said, we are going to still put out regular videos. I don't know how frequently we will go live in the summer, but we will still have these two guys joining me. I'll still put out my solo stuff. Obviously, the minor league updates next week's going to be the last one, and it's only Sacramento this week. Everybody else has already finished their seasons. I'll probably do, you guys are welcome to join on. I know Ricky especially has a lot of knowledge on the minors. We'll probably do a full season recap on that after Sacramento finishes their season. We'll do one for all of the levels and just talk about their overall, how they went. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like I said, hit that button and, get us, we'll still be putting out a ton of content, even though the Giants season's wrapping up. We're still going to be coming up with ideas and getting stuff and trying to get some people to join the show for some cool interviews and things like that. So yeah.
Yes, sir.
Cool. All right. Appreciate you guys. We're going to pop off and have a good one.
All right, guys.